When you think about how a company pays its people, your mind probably jumps straight to salary. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. The way a company actually structures compensation is this fascinating story about strategy, about incentives, and sometimes about some really big, hidden promises. Okay, let's get into it.
And this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. It sounds like a magic trick, right? Paying out all this value without ever touching the cash in the bank. But it's not magic at all. It's actually a core part of modern business, and we're going to break down exactly how it all works. See, for most companies, especially in really competitive industries like tech, compensation isn't just another line item on an expense report. No, it's one of the most powerful tools they have to get the best people in the door, motivate them to do amazing work, and, this is the big one, make sure they want to stick around. And for that, you need a lot more than just a simple paycheck.
And the secret sauce to all of this, it's a concept called vesting. It's actually a pretty simple but brilliant idea. A company promises you something valuable, like company stock, but you don't get it all at once. You have to earn it, piece by piece, over time, just by staying with the company. It's their way of saying, hey, if you stick with us and help us grow for the next few years, you'll get to share in that success.
So this whole thing doesn't just happen overnight. The journey really breaks down into 3 key steps. First up is the grant. That's the moment the company makes the promise. Then you have the vesting period. That's you, the employee, putting in the work and the time. And finally, you get to the settlement. That's the good part, when the cash or the stock you've earned actually lands in your account.
Okay, so this leads us right to the most common way companies pay people without actually using cash. They pay them with little pieces of the company itself. This is what's called share-based compensation, and believe me, it has completely changed the game for how businesses attract and reward their people. So why do they do this? What's the big advantage? Well, for a young, growing company, cash is oxygen. You need it for everything. Paying with stock lets them save that precious cash for building new products or expanding into new markets. Plus, and this is huge, it turns employees into owners. Suddenly, you're not just working for a paycheck, you're working to make your own stock more valuable. When the company wins, you win. It's a powerful motivator.
Now, the big one you'll hear about all the time is something called a restricted stock unit, or an RSU. Now listen closely, an RSU isn't actually stock. Not yet, anyway. It's a promise from the company that says, hey, you stick with us for, say, 4 years, and we promise we will give you this specific number of shares when the time is up.
Now, you've probably heard of stock options too, right? So what's the real difference? Well, it's pretty simple. An RSU is a promise for a full share of stock. So as long as the company's stock is worth more than 0, your RSUs have value. A stock option, on the other hand, is just the right to buy a share at a price that's set today. If the stock price drops below that price, well, your options are totally worthless. They're underwater, as they say. So bottom line, RSUs are way safer, while options are a much riskier bet with a potentially higher reward.
Okay, so paying with stock sounds like a total free lunch for the company, doesn't it? No cash out the door, you've got happy, motivated employees. What's the catch? Well, it's not that simple. There's a very real cost. It's just not a cost that shows up on the company's bank statement.
Yeah, I know, this looks like a bunch of accounting jargon, but stick with me, because the takeaway here is actually pretty straightforward. Accounting rules force companies to recognize the value of that stock promise as a real expense on their income statement. They just spread that cost out over the vesting period. So, get this, even though 0 cash is being spent, the company's reported profit actually goes down year after year.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at this quote from Alphabet, Google's parent company. They put it right out there. They say stock-based compensation, or SBC, is a real cost of running our business. They're basically saying, look, this isn't some accounting gimmick. It's what we have to pay to get the best people on the planet.
Okay, so if the company isn't spending cash, what is the real cost? Well, it all comes down to one single word: dilution. Think of the company like a big pizza. When the company creates brand new shares to give to employees, the pizza itself doesn't get any bigger. Instead, the slices for all the existing owners just get a tiny bit smaller. That's the true cost. So at the end of the day, here's what's really happening. Share-based pay is a direct transfer of wealth. It's taking a small piece of ownership value from the company's existing shareholders and giving it to the employees who are building the company's future. The cost isn't paid in cash, it's paid in ownership. All right, let's totally shift gears. We've talked about how they pay you now, but what about the promises for way down the road? I'm talking about retirement. For decades, companies made these really specific promises to their employees about life after work, but the nature of that promise has changed dramatically.
So really, there are two totally different worlds of retirement plans. Over on the left, you've got what most of us have today, a defined contribution plan, like a 401k. The company's promise is defined and simple. We'll contribute this much money to your account. After that, it's on you. You bear all the investment risk. On the right, you have the old-school defined benefit pension. Here, the company's promise is about the payout. They say, we guarantee you'll get this much money every month for the rest of your life. In that world, the company takes on all the risk.
Yeah, you just don't see those traditional pensions offered to new hires anymore. They're just way too risky and expensive for most companies. But, and this is a big but, a lot of large, older companies still have these massive obligations from the pension promises they made to workers decades and decades ago. And those old promises can become a gigantic problem.
Because what happens when the pot of money they set aside to pay for those pensions just isn't enough? Well, that's when a promise that was made with the best of intentions can turn into a financial anchor, weighing down the entire future of a company.
So how do you know if a pension plan is in trouble? Well, it boils down to this really simple idea called funded status. You just take everything the plan owns, all of its assets, and you subtract everything it owes in future promises. That's the obligation. If you end up with a negative number, the plan is underfunded. It means the IOU is way bigger than the bank account.
And if you want a real-world example of how bad this can get, just look at General Electric. It's staggering. For years, their pension plan was totally fine. But then, thanks to things like falling interest rates, the gap between what they had and what they owed just exploded. By 2020, their pension deficit, the shortfall, was equal to an incredible 41% of the company's entire stock market value. I mean, that is a massive financial hole to have to climb out of.
So let's wrap this all up. What should you actually be looking for? Whether you're an investor, an employee, or you're just curious, here are 3 big red flags to keep an eye on. First, is the total number of company shares growing really fast? That's a sign of dilution. Second, are you seeing huge recurring compensation expenses that are labeled non-cash? Remember, that's a very real cost. And third, does the company have a large and growing pension deficit? That's a giant IOU that could drain the company's resources for years to come.
Which really leaves us with one final thought. A salary is simple, right? It's a number on a piece of paper. But the true cost of paying a workforce is woven deep into a company's financial DNA in the form of stock promises and retirement IOUs. So the next time you see a headline about corporate profits, it's worth asking yourself, am I really seeing the full picture?